Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, Canadian real estate market update with a particular focus on Vancouver. If you're getting sort of value entertainment out of these videos, all I ask you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. Yes, I am wearing my Bitcoin to the moon shirt in light of this enjoyable bull market. Yes, for those of you who have asked, I don't talk about my investments too often, but I have been long Bitcoin for a while, Ethereum, and so when those do, all you commenters below, when this does go to zero and blows up, as you all claim it's going to, feel free to dunk on me then. But until then, I will continue to wear this shirt with pride. But I want to switch gears away from the bullish crypto space, and I want to focus on the Canadian macro housing, which is obviously the framework majority of this channel. Because I had to laugh. We had CMHC out this past week with another forecast. Despite being wrong on their last one, they're doubling down. This time, putting forecasts out to 2023. So they're trying to forecast national home prices into 2023. They couldn't even get the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months correct, let alone now they're trying to forecast several years out. And I think this is part of the problem with economists is that sometimes they're trying to validate their job, and they just you're sitting there behind a computer and running models, and that's kind of the old joke, right? Is that economists tend not to be good investors because if it doesn't fit in the model, they can't understand it. I actually think that's a very simple analogy to apply to the crypto space as well, right? If you can't put it into model, it's very hard for people to understand. It's the tech guys that seem to get it. But anyways, and it's a similar thing for housing, right? I mean, like so much of this is like, how you can't forecast house prices outside of like 4 months, let alone like 3 years. Because so much of it depends on inflation, it depends on credit creation, money supply growth, central bank policy, government policy, all of which can change on a whim, right? I mean, like had we gone back 12, 18 months ago, had anyone forecasted that you'd have double 20% record money supply growth, that you would have the Bank of Canada, for example, owning 40% of the bond market? No. So like these things change. And so that's what I want to focus this conversation on, is not only is CMHC's forecast not worth the paper that it's written on, because nobody can forecast these things with reliable accuracy over time, but I also want to focus on the key inputs that they look at, right? So like they'll plug things into their model and say, well, based on population growth and based on housing supply, this is where we're projecting real estate prices. But what they fail to actually put into their models, which I think is the most important, and this is really how I tend to look at things, is from a financial macro view, is that arguably what's more important than housing supply and population growth, yes, those are important. What is most important is credit availability and credit creation, because you can have people coming here and moving here, but if banks aren't lending money, or if there's no appetite to issue loans, then it's not going to be very bullish for the housing market. If you've got an environment of loose credit and low interest rates, all of a sudden it becomes extremely bullish. So think about this for one example. Imagine a scenario where you have low interest rates like we have today. So you've got basically like a zero interest rate policy. And so everybody says, we're not building enough. We're not building enough. Well, it's like, we didn't have any population growth this year and house prices still went up 20% with basically very little economic fundamentals. It's very hard in an environment where people are trying to buy 2 condos, 3 investment condos, 4, 5, 6 investment condos. People are trying to accumulate. If you have a lot of the population trying to accumulate real estate, because your traditional savings assets like your GIC or your savings account or your government bonds, which again are typically deemed safer instruments, if they're not yielding anything, they're giving you, 0.5%, 1%, people are basically forced to speculate into the real estate markets. And so that's why, again, you can't build enough to appease that level of appetite, right? If people want to come here and accumulate real estate, it's very hard to keep pace with that. So that's the main thing I want to focus on is Lynn Alden put out a great chart here, which basically shows broad money growth along with inflation. And typically what we see is every time that broad money growth expands, you tend to see inflation rise with it, right? And that's what we're seeing during this pandemic, as you can see in that chart, is that in the US and in Canada, you have this money expansion, which now obviously we're talking about inflation concerns. We can talk about the price of lumber. We can talk about copper hitting all-time highs, which is obviously adding to the cost of building new homes. And that ultimately gets passed through onto the end user. So you've got a situation where you've got this massive money expansion, and we have to keep an eye on the money expansion now, right? So this is going to determine where inflation goes moving forward. So people are saying, well, is this inflation transitory? Will it collapse? Once sort of the funny money dies out of the system, or this sort of pent up demand, whatever you want to call it, is this just like a head fake and we're going to roll over? A lot of this all depends on fiscal spending, fiscal dominance is what they're calling it, and commercial credit creation, because there's really two ways to expand the money supply. You have commercial lending, which is basically when banks like RBC or TD Bank issue you a new mortgage. They basically are creating new credit into the system. They're actually by creating that credit, you're actually creating increased demand. You're actually increasing consumer purchasing, right? New credit. If you inject more money into the system, that money ultimately has to go somewhere. And so that tends to push up the price of things. Now, obviously, you can do that on the fiscal side as well, where you can start handing people checks. And one of the ways the government is doing this in Canada, for example, is you look at it and say, think about the, for example, like even for my own business, I had this. So I have a business bank account with RBC. And it flashes up on my screen every time I log in. It says, hey, do you want a business loan, a Canadian government-backed loan where we'll give you can basically borrow, I think it was like, I don't know what it was $40,000 that you can borrow at 0% interest rate. So you can borrow $40,000, 0% interest rate, and as long as you pay it back, I think if you pay it back before the end of 2023, you don't have to actually pay the full thing. You only have to pay. So if you borrow $40,000 and you pay $30,000 of it back before the end of 2023, you get to basically keep that $10,000. So it's essentially like a free $10,000. That's how you increase the money supply. Is that you go through the commercial banking channel. So you tell the banks, listen, issue this loan to Steve at 0% interest rate, because we're guaranteeing it. We're the backstop. But you issue this loan to Steve, and then as long as he pays, he can actually just keep that $10,000. So that's how you have this massive monetary expansion. And so if we look into Canada now, in the M2, which is probably the most popular method of just measuring, the money supply growth. Money supply in Canada year over year has expanded by 18%. So imagine a scenario where, if you look at the monetary base, you've had a situation where over the past year, we have added 18% more basically fiat currency into the system. And so all the money in existence, we've added 18% of that supply in the past 12 months. Now you can imagine why this would be inflationary if you just start adding a whole bunch of currency into the system, that obviously it devalues the worth of everything else, right? It devalues the worth of your purchasing power, right? So everything else goes up. So people look at it and say, oh my God, real estate again, nationally is up 20%. And over the next couple months, the way this home price index is measured is that it will ultimately hit all-time highs. And there are really very little economic fundamentals, but this is what I'm sort of ultimately coming to the conclusion of is like these economists, for example, at CMHC, none of them are looking at the monetary base. They simply look at it and say, well, based on population growth, based on housing starts, and based on the employment or labor market, this is how we project home prices. And this is why they get so many, like this, why these forecasts are not worth the paper that they're written on, because it's like, well, you're forgetting the one most important and crucial piece is the credit supply, the monetary base. So, again, if we continue to do this unlimited QE, fiscal deficit spending financed by the central bank, and we expand our money supply by 18 to 20% per year, of course the underlying asset values are going to increase. And they're probably going to increase, a hell of a lot more than what CMHC is predicting. And I understand that people will say, well, this is a bubble. This is a massive credit bubble. Canadian housing is going to blow. And I would certainly agree to the extent that it is a credit bubble. You have unbelievable credit expansion in Canada. You've got unbelievably high asset prices. But it's almost one of those, what they call is the crack up boom, where it's not necessarily that the asset values again are going up. It's just that you have this, you're witnessing, in my opinion, I think this is the single largest wealth transfer in history. This is the single largest currency debasement, and it's happening in front of everybody's eyes. And there's very, very few that actually understand what is happening. And that's obviously why, again, I'm wearing the shirt that I'm wearing. And I don't care if you think it's a proper store of value or not. Part of the reason it's going up is not just because it's a new and expanding technology that has network effects, but it's predominantly because you have this massive debasement that is pushing up all asset classes. And so that's really how I want you to take a look and understand these CMHC forecasts that come out. So again, regardless, if we look at our labor market here, certainly getting better. But the labor market, as we've come to see, the economic fundamentals start to matter less when you have seemingly unlimited money printing. Now, I understand the view that this probably won't end well. But the economic fundamentals start to dissipate when you start expanding the money supply to the lengths that we are. So that's all I got for this week. I did a video. Well, if I haven't posted it, it will be published. But if anyone's interested in just the specifics of the Vancouver housing market, I did my monthly deep dive on that. So I encourage you to go check that out. I think what we'll probably do here in the coming weeks is I'm gonna do a sort of monthly. I'm gonna do that monthly Q&A. I think people seem to really like the live Q&A. So if you have questions and concerns, you'll be able to rant in the live Q&A. So we'll probably set that up. But as always, love to hear your thoughts below. See you next week.